It's come to my attention that there's a lot of guys out there, particularly in DIY booths, that are struggling to lay their sealer like glass. Now, there's potentially a bunch of reasons why that's the case. The first thing we're going to go over is the application, although I doubt that is the issue for most of you. It could be for some of you. And then we'll go into the reasons that I think are way more likely to be causing your issue with your sealer going down dry, grainy, heavy texture, and just overall ruining your paint job. So here on this spray out card, I'm going to show you what happens when you spray with too low of a pressure first. So that's low pressure. You see all that texture? Our sealer is not getting broken up enough. So if your sealer is going down wet like this, but has a bunch of texture, chances are you're spraying at too low of a pressure. Now over here, let's spray at too high of a pressure. See that? It's very, very dry and a lot of texture. The reason why that's happening is because your material is drying before it has a chance to hit the panel and flow out. Now, when we use the right pressure, look, you can see this one is already drying. This one is still wet. Now, when we use the right pressure, you see the difference there? Wet and low texture, unlike this. Now let's give it a shot on our hood to apply it correctly so you guys can see how it should be going down. You should have very small droplet sizes. And when you're done, your panel should look wet. Just like that. It should have low texture and everything should look nice and wet. It's very, very important that this material is wet after your application because that is what allows this to flow out. Now, if you see, we got a bunch of rock chips and crap that we filled in here. So I'm gonna go ahead and go over those with my sealer as well. Because trying to cover that crap with my color is always a nightmare. So I just seal over it. Back to our spray out cards real quick. You can see the one that we sprayed correctly is still wet and it's smoothing out a whole bunch. Whereas the one that we sprayed incorrectly is already dry. This didn't have a chance to flow out. So I'm gonna put our base on both of these so you guys can see the difference that it makes. Because without a smooth sealer, there's no shot you're getting a smooth paint job. At the end of the day, everything goes on top of your sealer. So if that's rough, everything's gonna be rough. So now for the rest of the video, every time we put a coat of paint on our panels, we're gonna put a coat of paint on our spray out cards. And I'm gonna apply our paint the same on both of these cards. And then at the end, we're gonna compare the two and see the difference it makes. Remember, the one on the right was the one that had our sealer applied incorrectly, and the one on the left is the one that had it applied correctly. Now that we got the correct application method out of the way, we're going to talk about what I think is actually causing an issue for most of you guys. And I don't think that it's just causing an issue with your sealer. I think it's probably causing an issue with your metallics as well. It all comes down to drying. If your paint does not dry right, there's no way it's gonna look right or it's gonna give you the finish that it was intended to give you. By the way, I started using this cool thing that we had, but I just never used it for some reason. So now I can have my panel dry while I go talk to you guys. The main thing that I think is causing your drying issues is not your temperature, not your hardener, not your reducer, something that is extremely overlooked in the industry, and that is your humidity. You probably are lacking humidity in your booth. The reason why the lack of humidity is going to cause your paint to dry too quickly is because the air where you're painting is essentially starving for moisture. So as soon as that moisture leaves your gun, the air just wants to grab it, and it does, and it dries your paint out before it even lands on the panel. And that's probably what's happening with a lot of your metallic colors as well. Now, there's a lot of ways to remedy that drying issue, which we're going to get into. But if you guys didn't realize, I kind of forgot something here. Normally, you guys know I wet bed over my sealer edge, and I forgot to do that. So you can see our edge is looking pretty disastrous right now. If you guys didn't see the video where I spoke about this, you should definitely check that out after this one. It's probably one of my, I would consider to be one of my most valuable videos that I made. So in regards to remedying this drying issue, there's one main thing that I would suggest before you try anything. If you don't already have a thermometer in your booth that displays temperature and humidity, that's something you definitely 1000% need to invest in. I'd be willing to bet that the majority of you guys out there didn't know the ideal level of humidity for painting is 40 to 60%. So ideally, you want to be right in the middle of that, and you want to be around 50% humidity. So the best way to fix the drying issue is to get a reading on your humidity. Chances are it's going to be very low compared to what you need, because 50 to 60% is not really something that's common in a lot of places in the world. In New York it is, fortunately, for the most part. And then figure out how you want to increase the humidity where you're spraying. And there's a bunch of different ways you can go about that. You're going to see in the Mexico video how I went about doing that, because that is the issue we had there. And if you choose a way to go about increasing your humidity and it's not effective enough, you're still having an issue, say it improved, but it's not yet perfect, then there's a bunch of other things you can do, and I'll try listing as many of them as I can right now and explaining how they work and why they would work. The first thing I would recommend you do is use a faster reducer. So use the hardener that matches your temperature where you're spraying, but use a reducer that's faster than what you're using now. The reason I suggest that is because it's essentially going to force your material to dry faster, which your environment is doing on its own. So you're helping your material and its drying process match your environment better. And that's going to help that sealer dry how it was intended to dry, because you're essentially allowing your material to force the drying before the environment forces the drying. The next thing you can try to do is actually slightly under reduce your material a little bit. This is going to make it thicker. Generally, when you're spraying a thicker material, they take longer to dry. The last thing I would ever do is over reduce your sealer if you're having drying issues, because when you over reduce, you make your material thinner. And if your material is thinner, it's going to dry faster. Now, let's say you slightly under reduce with a faster reducer and you see an improvement on how your sealer is laying, meaning that it's actually going down wet and staying wet slightly longer, but not quite long enough. The next thing that you can do is try to pair it with a faster hardener, which, yes, is going to make your material dry quicker and ultimately make it have more texture. But we want our material in control of our drying, not our environment. Oh man, now because I didn't put my wet bed directly over my sealer, I can see my edge on both sides. So what I'm gonna have to do is sand that down with my K1000 Kovacs. By the way, if you guys wanna support the channel in a little bit of an extra way, in case you didn't know, I sell a few of the products that I use, this sandpaper being one of them, on my website. So if you want to support, you can go pick up some of that. It's free shipping, domestic in the United States. If you want international shipping, you can email me and we can figure it out. So I'll just go over my edge, nice and light like that. And now because this color has a bunch of metallics and a bunch of pearls in it, I'm gonna have to wet bed this whole panel one more time just to make sure it doesn't look crazy when I take it outside. I guess now would be a good time to say also, if you get any value out of the video, consider dropping a like and hitting that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. All right, we got that sanded down. We got our wet bed on. Now we're gonna give it one pass with our color, then we're gonna drop coat the whole thing. And we'll go over the last thing that I want you guys to consider if you're having that issue with your sealer not laying flat. If you try the slow hardener and try under reducing and try a slightly lower pressure and it's still not perfect, the last thing I want you to consider is the airflow. Because ask yourself, when we want paint to dry, what do? We take our gun, we turn the pressure up and we blast it at it, or we use our blowers and we blow air at it, right? So if you're in a DIY booth with a cross draft, well, that draft is going right across all your panels. What I would suggest you try is first try moving your panels away from the fan to limit the amount of air that's passing over them. And then the second thing you could do is just turn off the exhaust fan altogether. If you do all of these things, even with the incorrect humidity, you will 100% see an improvement. But ultimately, the best thing you can do is get your humidity where it's supposed to be. All right, let's throw our first coat of clear on both of our spray out cards. So I realized I mentioned the lower pressure, but I never expanded on it. So the way the lower pressure is going to help you out is when you use a lower pressure, it allows the paint to come out thicker, which is going to enable it to stay wetter for longer. Kind of like the same thing I just mentioned about cross draft booth and how too much airflow is going to cause it to dry too quickly. It's the same idea. And obviously having a quality gun is going to come in handy because higher quality guns allow you to use a lower pressure and they still atomize the paint effectively. And then the second thing I wanted to mention to you guys was you always want to make sure, not just for your sealer, but anything, you want to make sure that your panel temperature is the same as the temperature in the booth. If your panel's colder, for example, your sealer is going to bead up and it's going to dry really rough. And then I had one more thing also for you guys. You probably do this already, but in case you don't, it's another application thing. you want to apply it like clear. So you want to apply it slow with a heavy 75% overlap. So hopefully these things help you out, because I've been there before when my sealer dries rough, and it really does just destroy the entire paint job. But I'm sure something in here is going to help you. All right, now let's check our spray out cards to see if we can see the difference here. It is a pretty small surface, so I'm not sure if it'll be very apparent. So there's our incorrectly sprayed sealer, and there is our correctly sprayed sealer. It's very hard to see on camera, but the texture on this one looks a little looser and a little flatter, whereas this one looks like it's a little tighter and a little more texture. But I'm sure you guys who are struggling laying the sealer know that there's a big difference. Anyway, here's how everything came out. That's going to be it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, if you got any value out of it, or if you were entertained, if you could, drop a like, comment, or maybe even subscribe. Until the next time, peace.